So we probably have over 500,000 objects in our collection. In terms of how many are on exhibit, I would say maybe 10% most of the time. That means that sometimes people are going to want to see what else there is. The Maine State Museum gets a lot of requests from the press and from members of the public and from researchers, and they're all always different, and we handle them in different ways as a result. Usually a request like this will come into one of the curators, and I'm often the default curator, so a lot of times people will contact me even though they might want to look at photographs or something, say. So then I will forward their request on to the appropriate curator. But in the case of the Samantha Smith material, I was the appropriate curator. We try and find things in the collection that will work for them and tell stories. These are, she was given so many pins, Samantha was. So this is from Artek. It says Artek in Russian. And that's where she got a lot of them, but people just gave her pins as well. So 40 years ago, in 1982, Samantha Smith, who was 10, wrote a letter to Yuri Andropov, who was the General Secretary of the USSR. So this is before it was Russia and it was the Soviet Union. And at the time, there was this big discussion going on about was there going to be a nuclear war, and Andropov was seen as pretty hard line, and things were tense, feelings were tense. And so this little girl from Manchester sent a note to Andropov saying, do you want a war? We don't want a war. Why can't we have peace? And eventually he wrote back and said that people in the Soviet Union want peace. And we are peaceful people. Why don't you come and visit us and we will show you? And off they went for 2 weeks in the Soviet Union. And she traveled with this huge posse of people who had been assigned, journalists and people from the US government, people from the Soviet government. And she went to lots of different places, including a big camp for children. And she made friends. After she died, there was a huge outpouring of grief and affection for her. And her mother, Jane Smith, founded the Samantha Smith Foundation. And that lasted quite some time, bringing kids from the Soviet Union to the United States and vice versa, and getting other kids just to try and find common ground between the two nations and between other nations, and to forge friendships. After the close of the foundation, Samantha Smith's mother, Jane, decided to give the material to the Maine State Museum. And at the time, we couldn't accept it because our legislation that founded the museum said things had to be 80 years old or older. And so instead, she gave everything to the library. Eventually, we got that law changed, and as a result, the library that took good care of them for several years transferred the collection to us. And that's how everything came to the museum. So I was contacted a few months ago by somebody from CBS saying that they wanted to do a segment on Samantha Smith on CBS Sunday Morning. And of course, we were happy to help.
How many people are part of the crew?
It's very small. One.
So one camera person, you and
He's a one-man band this time. It's like they're...
So then we started a conversation. And we start to kind of narrow down what kinds of things they might be interested in. So in this case, they just want to know about the impact she might have had. What was the travel? What was her trip like? So we're focusing on sort of iconic objects from her visit. I did bring out a box that's just full of some of the gifts that she got from regular people as well, just to show people that there was so much that they were coming home with in terms of gifts.
And then if the samovar and the thing could be on the table. So.
And the slippers.
And the slippers. Yeah, that would be
Then
great.
we can have the uniform.
And I think this would be the background, because I mean I think that's what
Perfectly natural.
And
Once we have that conversation about what somebody needs to research, then we can find out if it's possible. But in this case, I knew that we could pull together enough things that were relatively small, but still big enough to show on TV, and we could accommodate that. We could fit these objects in. Everywhere she went, people gave her gifts.
And that's a Russian tradition. If you meet someone or if you go somewhere, you bring them gifts. Usually just something little. But she certainly was given a lot of things. There are more dolls. Dolls were popular and teddy bears were popular because she was a kid. You sort of forget that she was how young she was. She was only 11 when she went there, and she was only 10 when she wrote the letter.
We pulled a bunch of things from the collection that had to do with Samantha's trip. The objects then needed to come from our storage area and go to conservation to make sure that they were sturdy enough to even get set up on mannequins in one case, and make sure they were clean and shiny and were showing their best face to the public. We pulled three-dimensional objects like the gifts from Andropov, and then we also pulled like the Andropov letter and some photographs and that sort of thing. So we had both three-dimensional and two-dimensional objects that related to her trip. So those are some of the steps that we have to go through to get ready for a presentation like this.
Remind you,
Yes.
Mo is the only person in this room. Most people are very polite and they like look around. But when you're talking, it's just Mo, and you can look at that stuff, but
Okay.
and no Matt.
And you, okay, Laurie, could you, yes, state your name and full spell it, give your title, please.
My name is Laurie LaBar, Laurie, L-A, capital B-A-R, and I'm the Chief Curator of History and Decorative Arts in Maine State Zoo.
How did this collection come about?
Well, Samantha Smith was
Almost streamlined. Well, let's begin going through some of these objects, and we can cut back and forth to the larger story and then the object itself. What do you want to start with? I'm happy to start with anything.
Well, why don't we start with the gifts? So Andropov invited her.
Is it too delicate to
Is
pick
it,
it
can
out?
you pull it out? If it's too delicate, don't worry
Don't
about
do
it.
it.
Yeah, this one I think is too delicate. It's really pretty.
But at least by taking out that cotton.
Yeah, right.
Oh my gosh, it's beautiful.
Are these called troikas? Is that what these are called?
Yes, a troika with 3 horses.
Troika. It's clay. It weighs a ton.
So this is the kind of folk art that she was given.
People gave all kinds of